All right, welcome back to the channel. My name is Joshua, and this is Knox Studios. We're going to be looking at the four agreements today on day 4. As we do that, I'm going to bring in it's kind of a layover frequency here. I'll keep it fairly low, but this is 285, 528, 852 layered frequency. We've been sitting in this really since day 1, except for day 2. So this essentially is a subroot with the solar plexus and third eye as an overlap. And the reason I think that this frequency might fit most today is simply because this does have some pretty ancient wisdom attached to it. Simplifies a lot from what modern day religions and so forth bring to the table. It's not separate from, but maybe even could be considered in addition to. Now, it's called a practical guide to personal freedom. In fact, one of the meditations in the back of the book that leads into a prayer for freedom. And it is quite a beautiful book, all in all. If you've maybe heard of it before, you might have had some reference to it, but I just want to kind of dive into it a bit. There's only so much out of these books that I'm really permitted to share publicly or live like this, but just to give you a basic understanding of the book itself is there's an introduction or just to the Toltec and referencing their 1,000-year history, where anthropologists and the relationship between masters and students and this whole concept of man becoming God kind of concept. But to what end? Like, from where? And how does that become what it is? And just really understanding, I guess, in full that we are and can become ready to access happiness and love more continually in today, even. But there are certain things that rob us of that ability to experience happiness and love. And in that, it's from the format of the dream. There's a dream space that we have the capacity to create for ourselves. However, the world has kind of been robbing us of that dream. Now, it's not a blame game. It's nothing of that nature. It's just the fact that there are certain parts of ourselves that if we can get to as a collective whole, to understand again, from Toltec wisdom or otherwise, I found that these have really opened the door to a lot more substance and higher consciousness, at least for myself. Now, none of this comes easily, but it is quite simple. The first time this book came into my hands many years ago now, I read it within a day and a half or 2 days maximum. And for anyone still struggling in lower levels of consciousness with guilt, shame, apathy, anger, and the like, anything without courage, then you can reference that. And we might get into it later, but the map of consciousness outlined by David R. Hawkins is a great reference for lower levels of consciousness and how those counteract higher levels of consciousness. So briefly, I just want to interject here what the agreements are, maybe touch a little bit on each one. Being that the first one is in relationship to this ability to create, this God-given gift that the majority of us have the ability to use anyway, which is in our voice, with our throat. And tomorrow we'll get more into like the language and certain things that kind of end up happening no matter what, in the manner of, understanding and becoming higher level conscious communicators. But in the first agreement is just the fact that we need to become impeccable with our word. So be impeccable with your word. What does that actually mean? And to what extent can we actually expound on this principle of creation? And today, what I've acknowledged for myself anyhow, is that it comes down to even the frame of making a commitment to something. If I make a commitment to something, then essentially, if I fall out of that commitment for one reason or another, with or without excuse, it acts as a sin against myself. So it spiritually will hurt me. So it's very important to, acknowledge and communicate with my words truth. Not making commitments to things that I'm not willing to go through with. And that's the matter of like principle of going through versus around. And impeccable by definition meaning without sin. So if sin does come from this contradiction that I might run into whenever I give my word to something or somebody. When I say something and do the opposite. And that's a really wonderful thing to just become more aware of, as we're always searching for like, why do I feel this way and why do I feel that way? Because when we're impeccable, we begin to start taking responsibility, and we refuse to judge or blame others. And that's what it really comes down to, right? Personal accountability to the commitments that I make in this world. To Knox, to my purpose. The second agreement then becomes, and this is a very difficult one, to not taking anything personally. That when I stand my ground and everybody else is kind of like pushing the pushback, oh, I can't believe you're changing. I can't believe you would do that. Whether intentional or unintentional. Even to the point where when people start giving me praise, to remain humble and practice humility, to stay here, to do good works without sharing and saying things might be a good method in terms of like practicing this firsthand. But not taking anything personally, not allowing this introduction to the world to make it bigger than it needs to be. But no matter what, when other people come in and they say, I am this or I am that, that just means that that's one of the other 7 billion opinions there are of me, or 8 billion other, interpretations of who I am. When reality exists in here, in me. Nothing from the outside world can define me. Only I have the possibility to define me and do my utmost to align my spirit being with that which I've come to understand as the universe. And it's just briefly, we'll say things like, taking things personally sets yourself up to suffer for nothing. When we're, as humans, it goes on, that we're, as humans, addicted to suffering. We become so conditioned to suffering when we act out of sorts and like ask for validation and seek this approval of other people. Like, the suffering ensues and it becomes a very comfortable space. As sad as it is to admit, it is the case. So from there, the third agreement becomes making assumptions inside of my head, just between the ears, looking out at the world and assuming that this will happen if this happens. The action-reaction tendency. We might just think, because I thought something, they had to have thought that same thing. When in reality, is we all have different lenses in our eyes, different perceptions, different sensitivities. It doesn't make us separate, but our experience does evoke different sensitivities to this world. And to assume that just because I feel some way in this situation does not mean that this situation makes you feel the exact same way. And to allow this lack of toxicity, this lack of my will, my assumptive nature, to emotionally poison others is the best action to make here. It says that we do create a lot of the emotional poisons just by making assumptions and taking it personally. So between these two middle ground agreements that we have the tendency of finding ourselves in this life, on this planet, in this space, we have to escape that. We have to find a way to only stay within ourselves. That no matter what other people's opinions or experiences are, we're not here to walk their walk or preach to them and what they need to do. Only to be our best selves. Which leads us into the fourth agreement. Just very simple, but not easy. Here we have to move beyond our laziness, our sloth nature, in always doing our best. And no matter what, leaning in, even in things that we might not be the best at. Acknowledge that, sure. But especially if I've made a commitment to doing it, go out there. Make the best of this opportunity, this situation. And don't cower from the opportunity itself. It doesn't need perfection. It just needs effort. And this is where corrective measures can be made. There's no perfect way to meditate. There's no proper way. Yeah, there's practices and ways to experience this personal growth in all different facets. But no matter what, without the willingness to just put my best foot forward, I'll fail here, and I won't be doing my best. It's easy to cower. It's hard to try, but try we must. And forgive me, I will read a little bit from this one. Because every action then becomes a ritual in which you are honoring God. After that, the next step is honoring God with every thought, every emotion, every belief, even what is right or wrong. Every thought becomes a communion with God, and you will live a dream without judgments, victimization, and free of the need to gossip and abuse yourself here. These are the promises of practicing the four agreements that are become beholden within us as we start to take accountability and become breaking these old habits and becoming more familiar with our own human nature of abusing ourselves, that suffering condition. Now, I'm not sitting here in front of you as though I don't suffer today still. I still have the tendency in a lot of different parts of my life. The good news is, though, I've just become more aware of that, and that's the point of progress that sets in motion the ability to sit up here and just talk. So here, with this information divulged, I'll move us into the final chapter, where we simply move into a prayer and a meditation space. I invite you to meditate now by closing your eyes. I'll turn up the frequency a bit. As you've closed your eyes, now bring your attention to your heart and feel all the love that comes from this heart. With these words in your mind and in your heart, we aim to have a strong connection of love. Together here, we're going to do a very special prayer just to experience this communion with our Creator. As we begin to focus our attention on the lungs, on that breath that goes straight into our heart, and bring our awareness to this place where only our lungs exist. Recognize these pleasureful feeling in our lungs when they expand to do the one thing that us as humans will naturally do and are capable of doing all the time, which is simply to breathe. For a moment here, let's take a very deep breath. And let's collectively feel this air as it fills our lungs. Imagine how the air is nothing but love. And notice this connection between the air and the lungs. Imagine this connection as a connection of love. So as we expand our lungs with this air until our body has needed to expel that air, we exhale. And again, feel the pleasure. Let's recognize that when we fulfill any need of our human bodies, it gives us pleasure. Even just to breathe gives us much pleasure. Even just to breathe is enough for us to be happy and to enjoy this life. And here we recognize that just being alive is enough. So let us feel the pleasure to be alive and the pleasure of feeling love. Let's ask the universe to come in, become present, to show ourselves to ourselves, and to have a communion with the universe here in this space, in this meditation, in this time together. And I invite you to prayer, your own prayer of freedom, of any resistance that you've carried, and has robbed you of your own serenity and space and time, enjoyment of the happiness and love that this world really is, that this universe really is. A place of love and happiness, nothing less. And enjoy your meditation. thank you for sharing this time with me today. And take a moment to thank yourself for spending time with yourself today. Perhaps learning something new, but at least just being open to learning something new. Let us continue to take a few last breaths and recognize that love relationship between the air that we breathe and our physical body at the lining of our lungs. And just allow that pleasure to sink in, that just to live is to love, and to be happy and joyous as easily as making a choice. To recognize how easy it is to enjoy this life. Thank you so much for you, and I wish you all the best going forward. Stay tuned.